When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Welcome back to the Grease Comedy YouTube channel. Today's video, we are going to be talking about Season 4 and also A Storm of Swords. Because for me personally, as I've just gotten done rereading A Storm of Swords, I've really noticed how different the two really are, even though, and again, I don't want to step on any toes. I admit that Season 4 is very good. It's by far most people's favorite season in A Game of Thrones. It's also, if you look at A Storm of Swords, their favorite book. I want to take a second to think about if, everybody always points the finger of Season 5 is the season where the show started to decline, and I definitely agree with that. I'm not arguing that point, but I'm arguing some of the things that were done in Season 4, even to make it as good as it was, could those things have been the reason that D&D ended up becoming more lazy, the scripts started getting worse, their adaptation skills got much worse? Was Season 4 really the cause of that? Because Season 4, in my opinion, was at the heights of D&D's success with the Game of Thrones. It is by far the climax, pretty much, of the entire show. And I want to point this out right away. If you think about the first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones, Season 4 is the one that very much deviates from the book the most. And I almost think that as the show went on, each season, they started changing little things that had big ripple effects, and Season 4 is definitely going to be a part of that issue. But Season 1 is a pretty faithful adaptation. It's probably the best adaptation of a show and book situation. I think it's really done well in Season 1. Season 2, again, they do good, but I do think you start to see those changes, right? You see, like, Robb and Jane Westerling isn't a thing in the show. It's a Talissa character. There's just a lot of changes, small changes like that kind of change how we view characters and that are different from the book. And then you get to Season 3 and Season 4, which are split A Storm of Swords, and you see it in kind of both Season 3 and Season 4, but there are those changes. And so, before I detail some of the things that I think led to D&D and their downfall of Game of Thrones, I would say if you enjoy the video, if you enjoy this content, consider subscribing and liking. But let's get into Season 4. So, I want to say this right away. Because of some of the changes that they made that were done, that were really well done. Like, I think the King's Landing plot, they change a lot of how certain conversations happen or events happen or give us extra scenes from the book that weren't there. That all makes sense. And so I think that D&D, because of the changes that they did and how positively they were looked at, I think they started to get a bit of an ego, and they started to get to the point where they believe that they could write the story and adapt the story better than George could do in his books. And so when you get to Season 5 and you get to this point where you have D&D making liberties of how they're going to do characters and how they're going to adapt it, and they very loosely adapt Feast for Crows and Dance into one season, I think this is kind of why. And it's not to say that Season 4 is perfect, because I think a lot of the bigger plot lines in Season 4 overshadow some of the things that were truly going on and some of those red flags. The one I think most people point to, it's the most obvious one, is Asha Greyjoy, or Yara in the show, going to try and save Theon, and that whole thing with shirtless Ramsay, and it's just really poorly written. It makes zero sense as a whole, and it's a sequence that is very reminiscent of what we're going to see later on in the show. But then you have that overshadowed because you have Tyrion's trial going on at that time. You have other things that kind of take you away from those moments, that you don't think about them as much when you rewatch Season 4. But those are kind of all undershadowed in this season. But also, if you think about the timing of events that D&D were doing in Season 4, some things were just completely screwed up from where they are. So, for instance, if you look at the end of Season 3, Bran and co. have already made it north of the Wall. So, where they end up in Storm of Swords, that's where they end up, right? They end up at the Night Fort, and then going north of the Wall with Cold Hands, and they meet Samwell, all that stuff. All of that happens in basically Season 3. And also another thing is that Cold Hands isn't even present in this part of the story to even show Sam where this door is and how to get south of the Wall and then get Bran there. None of that's present here. And there's a reason that Season 5 has no Bran, and this is why. Because the plot lines are just vastly sped up or slowed down from where they were in the book series. So when you have characters like Samwell Tarly being present at the Battle of the Wall, well, Sam doesn't even show up until after the Battle of the Wall even occurs, right? first time we see Sam at Castle Black is after Stannis has arrived and already won the battle. So there's a lot of those things that kind of will start to rear its ugly head later on in the show, because you have characters that are in places that they necessarily shouldn't be given the book stuff. So a perfect example that I'll have of this, and this is one that's not remembered as badly, but if you think about the Hound and Brienne, you think about that whole plot line, right? And they didn't know really what to do with Brienne because they screwed up her storyline. Because in season 4 there is no Lady Stoneheart, and I know like there's some people that don't really care that she wasn't in the show or not or whatsoever, and I think that yes, that could be the case if they had actually changed Brienne's storyline. The problem with Brienne's storyline is that her character really is supposed to function on Lady Stoneheart's plotline in the book, and also trying to find Arya and Sansa. Well, you have this convenience in season 4 and then into season 5 where Brienne literally finds Arya and Sansa within the span of like 3 to 4 episodes. That's what's crazy about it. So you take away a lot of what Brienne was doing in her arc in Feast for Crows, and you throw it out the window. So there's a lot of that stuff where it's like, oh yeah, it's really cool to see the Hound and Brienne, but when you take a step back and you go, wait a minute, you're telling me the Hound and Arya on foot got all the way to basically the Eyrie? The mountain clans are at their most dangerous at this point. There's all these issues that are going on trying to get to the Eyrie that's basically amplified by how Tyrion and Catelyn try to get there in season 1. Doesn't really make a lot of sense that they were able to make it there and then come back. And also, the Hound basically has Arya at the Bloody Gate and nobody bats an eye. Like, nobody says anything about it. Whereas, like, in the book, it makes total sense, right? The Hound is looking to get Arya to the Eyrie, but he's trying to do it, with a boat passage, right? That's why he's going to Salt Pans. And then they end up getting attacked, and we see how that kind of plays out in the show as well, but it just kind of is in a different spot. And so my point of all this is not to point out and say season 4 is bad. Season 4 is still really great, but it's to show that there were these little minor things that they started to change more and more. Things like Tyrion's reveal of, Tysha, right? That Tysha actually did, love him, and they actually had a good relationship until Tywin screwed it all up, right? That's the main thing that motivates him to go kill his father. And it still works really well in the show, don't get me wrong, but the Tysha reveal not being there deeply impacts the Tyrion character going forward. And so a lot of the things that season 5, doesn't do as well is almost because season 4 doesn't set them up properly. And so you have all these things where I think D&D started to get such an ego because of all the, fame they were getting because of their work on season 4 and the seasons before, that they started to go into season 5 and went, yeah, we can just do the story. We can condense things and make them go much faster. That's what they did with some of the plot lines in season 4. Think about some of the Wall stuff with Jon becoming the Lord Commander. We don't see Sam having to basically manipulate Dennis Mallister and Cotter Pike to try and basically beat Janos Slynt, because they know if Janos Slynt becomes Lord Commander, it's going to be hell for Jon, might be executed. Actually, very likely he'll be executed. All that stuff. They basically just have Sam give a little speech and people vote for Jon. And it's like, it works, but it's not nearly as good as it is for instance, in the book as it is in the show, because it's Samwell who's gone on this great adventure where when he leaves Castle Black, he is this scared individual. And by the time we get to, Storm of Swords, he's somebody that has much more confidence, right? He's growing as a person. And that's still present at the Battle of the Wall, right? That the thing that kind of supplements, our growth for Sam, and that payoff is kind of how he is during the Battle of the Wall with Pip, for instance. But it just shows you there's a lot of that stuff that they cut out and they changed that really hurt things going forward. So they set themselves up kind of for not as good of plot lines in the future. And they also were getting confirmation that they were able to get away with doing a lot of these getting away with doing these changes and getting away with, condensing the plot down a lot. And that's what led them to be like, yeah, we can condense Feast for Crows and Dance into one season. Of course we can. We're really good at this. Yeah, and so that's what kind of my discussion point was. I made another video this week. I don't know if it's going to be before or after this video about Oberyn in season 4 and talking about why I think he's actually better in the show than he actually is in the book. And a lot of that comes down to changes. And don't get me wrong. Again, I want to really make this clear. Season 4 is still a really good season, and it's by far it's the most popular season of all of them. but I do think, some of the things that come to bite us in the butt come off of some of the great things of season 4. Let me know what you guys think about season 4, though. Like, do you think I'm right? Do you think it is just, no, I'm looking into it too much, and it really just was season 5 that started that train of destroying, Game of Thrones and its quality? But I don't know. I think it's more obvious in season 5, but I think there are those things in season 4. But I will see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.